Matchstick factory workers. In 19th century England, one of the most dangerous jobs was found inside matchstick factories. These factories mostly employed poor, working-class women and girls, many of them under the age of 16. The work involved dipping wooden sticks into a chemical called white phosphorus, a substance that made matches easy to light but deadly to handle. There were no safety rules. Workers were given no gloves, no masks, and no ventilation. They breathed in toxic phosphorus fumes for hours each day. Over time, many developed a condition now known as phossy jaw. It started with a toothache, then swelling in the jaw. Eventually, the skin would break open, exposing bone that literally glowed in the dark from the chemical buildup. The jawbone began to rot. The pain was unbearable, and the infection often spread to the brain. If the jaw wasn't removed, the condition was fatal. Factory owners ignored the dangers. The workers were replaceable, and few had any power to speak out. When the women complained, they were often fired. But the rising number of cases and deaths eventually drew public attention. In 1888, the match girls' strike at the Bryant and May factory, led by the affected workers themselves, forced newspapers and politicians to take notice. Their courage helped trigger investigations into factory safety. Eventually, white phosphorus was banned in match production in the UK and later around the world. The suffering of these workers played a key role in the first major labor safety reforms in industrial history, chimney sweeps. In the 18th and 19th century Britain, chimney sweeping was a common but extremely dangerous job. The work was often given to children, some as young as 5 years old. Most came from poor families or were orphans sold into apprenticeships. Their small size made them useful for climbing inside narrow chimney flues, some of which were only 9 inches wide. The job required these children to crawl up inside soot-filled chimneys and scrape off the soot with metal tools. They often worked in the dark, with no protective gear and no proper training. Many children became stuck and suffocated to death. Others fell from heights or were badly burned when chimneys were still hot. The work caused long-term damage to their lungs and joints. A specific form of cancer, now known as chimney sweeps carcinoma, became common among these child workers. It was the first occupational cancer ever recorded. The disease affected the scrotum and was caused by constant exposure to soot. It was painful, disfiguring, and often fatal. Public concern grew over time as the conditions became more widely known. Reformers, doctors, and religious leaders began speaking out. In 1875, after years of pressure and several failed attempts at change, Parliament finally passed the Chimney Sweepers Act. It made it illegal to employ children for chimney sweeping and set rules for proper licensing and inspections. The law came too late for thousands of victims, but it marked an important step in the history of child labor reform: tunnel rats. During the Vietnam War in the 1960s and 70s, a special group of American soldiers were assigned one of the most dangerous tasks of the entire conflict. These men were known as tunnel rats. Their job was to enter and search the underground tunnel systems built by the Viet Cong. These tunnels were used to move troops, hide supplies, and launch surprise attacks. Tunnel rats had to crawl through tight, dark spaces with limited air and almost no visibility. The tunnels were often no wider than a person's shoulders. Inside, they faced extreme dangers, including live enemy soldiers, tripwire traps, punji sticks, snakes, and poison gas. Any noise could trigger an ambush. A single wrong move could cause an explosion or fatal injury. They usually carried only a flashlight and a handgun. Radios did not work underground, and backup was often too far to help in time. If something went wrong, they were alone. Some missions lasted only minutes, but many resulted in death or serious injury. Tunnel rats had one of the highest fatality rates of any U.S. military role during the war. Many soldiers who entered the tunnels never came back. The mental toll was also severe, with many veterans suffering long-term effects. Despite the risks, their efforts helped expose hidden supply routes and enemy bases. Their work remained largely unrecognized for years, but it played a key role in underground warfare during the Vietnam conflict. Coal miners. Coal mining has been one of the most dangerous jobs in history, both in the past and in modern times. It has existed for centuries in countries like China, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Miners have long faced daily risks while working deep underground. The most common dangers include gas explosions, tunnel collapses, and long-term exposure to coal dust. In poorly ventilated mines, methane gas builds up easily. A single spark can cause a deadly explosion. Cave-ins are also frequent, trapping or crushing workers without warning. Even when accidents do not happen, Miners often suffer from black lung disease. This condition, caused by inhaling coal dust over time, damages the lungs and can be fatal. In pre-20th century mining, safety standards were almost non-existent. Children and adults worked side by side in dangerous, cramped spaces. Equipment was basic, and emergency rescue was rare. Many miners died young due to accidents or disease. In modern times, coal mining remains deadly, especially in developing regions. China, for example, reported thousands of coal mining deaths each year during the early 2000s. Although improvements have been made, mining disasters still occur. Countries like India and parts of Africa continue to struggle with unsafe conditions and outdated equipment. Coal miners are exposed to both immediate and long-term threats. Despite advancements in technology, coal mining continues to rank among the most hazardous jobs in the world. The combination of physical danger and chronic illness makes it one of the most fatal occupations in history. Whalers. In the 18th and 19th centuries, whaling was one of the most dangerous jobs at sea. It was especially common in places like Nantucket, the Arctic, and around Greenland. Whalers spent months or even years at sea, living in harsh and isolated conditions. The main task of these workers was to hunt whales, often from small open boats. Once a whale was spotted, crews rowed close and used hand-thrown harpoons to attack. Injured whales would thrash violently, sometimes smashing boats or pulling them for miles. Many whalers died from being dragged under, struck by the whale, or thrown into freezing waters. Apart from the hunt itself, whalers face severe risks from the environment. Icebergs, strong storms, and shipwrecks were common in the North Atlantic. Freezing temperatures led to frostbite and hypothermia. If a ship was damaged or stranded, there were few chances for rescue. Some vessels disappeared without any record of what happened to the crew. Diseases also spread quickly on board. Poor nutrition, infections, and long-term exposure to cold weakened the men over time. Medical care was basic or non-existent. Injuries during the hunt or on the ship often led to death. Despite the dangers, whale oil was in high demand for lamps, soap, and other products. This made whaling a profitable industry, but the high fatality rate made it one of the most life-threatening jobs of its time. Many who went to sea never returned, and entire ships were lost without a trace. Brooklyn Bridge workers. The construction of the Brooklyn Bridge, which took place between the 1870s and 1883 in New York, was one of the most dangerous engineering projects of the 19th century. The workers who built the bridge faced deadly conditions on a daily basis. More than 20 confirmed deaths were recorded during the project, though the actual number may have been higher. One of the most serious risks came from working deep below the East River in pressurized chambers called caissons. These large, airtight structures allowed workers to dig underwater foundations. However, the rapid changes in pressure caused a condition known as caisson disease, now called decompression sickness, or the bends. This illness caused joint pain, paralysis, and sometimes death, and it was not well understood at the time. Many workers also died from falls while working on towers and cables without safety harnesses. Collapses of structures under construction were another major hazard. Some workers were crushed by falling materials or caught in machinery. Others were buried alive when accidents occurred below the waterline. The fatality rate on the Brooklyn Bridge project remains one of the highest for American infrastructure projects in the 1800s. Despite the deaths and injuries, the bridge was completed and became a landmark of engineering. However, the workers who built it paid a heavy price, and their suffering led to later improvements in safety standards for large-scale construction. Firefighters. In the 1st century CE Rome, firefighting was one of the most dangerous public duties. The Roman firefighting force, known as the Vigils, was established by Emperor Augustus and is considered one of the earliest organized fire brigades in recorded history. Their job was to prevent and fight fires across the crowded and mostly wooden city of Rome. The Vigils used basic tools such as buckets of water, axes, hooks, and ladders. Fire suppression was done by forming bucket lines or tearing down nearby buildings to stop fires from spreading. Protective gear did not exist, and fire-resistant materials were rare. The job often required them to enter burning structures or climb unstable buildings to reach flames or rescue citizens. The risk of death was extremely high. Fires could spread rapidly through densely packed neighborhoods. Roofs and walls collapsed frequently. Smoke inhalation, falling debris, and direct exposure to flames caused many fatalities. During the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE, under Emperor Nero's rule, the dangers reached a peak. The fire destroyed large parts of the city over several days. The Vigils were overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster. and many of them died trying to control the flames or assist residents. Despite their efforts, the fire caused massive destruction and loss of life. The job of a Roman firefighter was hazardous and underappreciated. The vigils faced regular exposure to fatal risks and had few protections. Their role, however, laid the foundation for future emergency response systems in urban areas. Steelworkers at Pittsburgh Mills. In the late 1800s to early 1900s, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, became one of the major centers of steel production in the United States. The steel mills there produced the materials that fueled industrial growth across the country. However, the work inside these mills was extremely dangerous. Steelworkers were exposed to intense heat, heavy machinery, and molten metal on a daily basis. There was no protective clothing, no helmets, and no modern safety rules. Molten steel often splashed from furnaces, causing severe burns and deaths. Workers operated large machines with sharp, fast-moving parts that could crush or amputate limbs in seconds. Explosions were common. Furnaces could overheat or break down, sending hot metal and fire through the workplace. Slips, falls, and toxic gas exposure added to the risks. Accidents often resulted in death or permanent injury. Records from the time show that about 1 in every 11 steelworkers in Pittsburgh was either killed or seriously injured each year. Many workers accepted these dangers because jobs in the mills paid more than most other types of labor. Employers often included the risk of death as part of the job itself, offering little to no compensation to families after fatal accidents. There were few labor protections. Unions were still developing, and many workers were recent immigrants with no legal support. The high death rate continued until workplace safety reforms and labor movements in the 20th century forced changes. Still, during the industrial era, steelworking remained one of the deadliest jobs in American history. Thank you so much for watching this video. And if you gained some knowledge, then please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more valuable knowledge. Until then, goodbye.